problem with that. But do you realize how many studies we went through on every single one? Let me finish my point.
Sure.
Because the difference is, I don't believe in medical McCarthyism.
Of course.
If anything, instead of going to her and say, don't show this person,
No, I'd love that.
then
Just
debate
make it
the
happen.
issue. But the difference is, you're assuming that the people here were against vaccines. Every single person in this film was pro-vaccine. Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who was excoriated, was for vaccines. He never once said he was anti-vaccine. He merely said he questioned the safety of the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. Now, let me take you on a little trip. Today, when I asked these people, do you still believe after you looked at the truth and looked at thousands of studies? The woman you saw at the end who held up the papers and said, these are only some of the studies I have, when I filmed her, she has stacked this high. It's her passion. And why is it her passion? Because she was crying when I was filming her. I chose not to put that in the film. And she said, I'm so angry at myself. I'm angry at the medical profession because in our hubris and in our arrogance, we assumed the truth was present in front of us. And I'm the one, she said, as head of pediatrics, I'm the one who caused thousands of kids to be vaccinated. And when those kids came back later and they were injured and they suffered from conditions, I refused to accept that it was the vaccine. And she said that a lot of those kids ended up with autism and other conditions. And a lot of them ended up in the hospital, and some died. She says, now I realize I was a perpetrator. And can you take the responsibility realizing that a profession, an entire profession, can yield such belief that it becomes cult-like? Now, to answer one more issue, every one of those people in there supported vaccine until they saw the truth. What you didn't see, because it's not in this film, but it was my previous one, Autism Made in USA, that 10 women who were filmed were all medical doctors whose own kids developed autism, who believed in vaccine, and one was a chairman of a department of a major medical school, and when she sounded the alarm to her colleagues, they excoriated her because you're not supposed to break ranks. And then she went through the DAN group, which helped them get well using natural techniques. I filmed 400 parents and their children in Chicago. They all had something in common. They had full-blown autism, and today they had various degrees of success in reversing it, including complete reversal. Not one of those parents had been featured in the American media. Not one had been interviewed. And so I took one of the people whose autism I personally reversed, Daniel Ortega, whose mother and father are New York City police officers, who had been completely autistic for 10 years, and it happened right after a massive series of vaccines. He was developing normally, and then he didn't speak for 10 years, and he was too big to handle. And they came after hearing me talk about how to deal with seizures naturally, and it worked, and then they wanted more, and I gave them the best lifestyle modification that I knew, and 2 years later, before 7,000 physicians and scientists at the World Congress in Anti-Aging Medicine in Washington, D.C., I walked out on the stage with 3 people. One was a professor at New York University, Marie McGovern, who had advanced end-stage Alzheimer's. Then there was Daniel Ortega, and Daniel went out. They didn't know what was supposed to happen, because these conferences, you have 22 minutes. It's a giant cavernous room, and you have a screen like this, and your report is, they read your report and see your graphs and your charts, and it was supposed to be on menopause, because I'd taken 287 women who had menopause, and I helped them reverse all their symptoms. And all the graphs and the charts and the medical biostatistical work were there. That's what they thought they were going to see. Instead, I brought out people whose conditions had been improved or reversed. And so out comes Daniel, and he says, he's got something in his hand. I said, what do you have in your hand? He said, Outstanding Student of the Week. And I said, for how many weeks? He said, 10 months. And which school? It was a very famous New York City school. And I said, Daniel, isn't that a normal school? He said, yeah, it's a normal school. I said, you hadn't gone to school, but you had advanced autism. He said, that's correct. He said, for 10 years, I couldn't speak. I would grunt. I would do repetitive motions. I'd bang my head on the wall. I was in this dark place. And then I started changing, and today, I play the guitar, I play the piano, I make the juices and make breakfast. Stunned silence. And I said, so, ladies and gentlemen of medicine and science, you're here today talking about what will happen if you get your grants and if you get your money from the state or pharmaceutical companies to change some stem cell so it will help with one of the symptoms of autism. Well, here's someone who doesn't have autism. Can you deal with that? Can you deal with something that goes beyond your paradigm? Can you be open at least to the reality that something other than your own prescription or textbook or cookbook of how you look at a person whose disease exists? And afterwards, 600 of them came out in the hallway to talk with Marie McGovern, who's back to normal, and Daniel Ortega. Here's the interesting part. Because it was only one person, they said it couldn't be real. That's the danger. I wrote a definitive report. I sent it to 7,000 members of the media. I sent it to every scientific magazine in the United States. I sent it to every member of Congress. I sent it to every one of the 5,000 plus members of state legislators. I sent it to every one of the 50 governors. I sent it to over 8,000 medical and scientific publications. It was called Death by Medicine. I accuse medicine as being the #1 cause of death and injury in the United States, exceeding heart disease, cancer. So, sir, you and anyone else who's a medical doctor who wants to say what you saw and how you're opposed to something, then why don't you come and apologize to my mother who was taking synthetic hormone replacement therapy when she had her heart attack in the middle of the night? I will not kiss your ass or apologize to medicine. I'm sorry. I'm here to talk about the victims, and the victims including of orthodox medicine, and not one article has been written except for the Journal of the American Medical Association saying that the #3 cause of death was medicine, and that's because they didn't add in infections, where people contribute to death in hospitals, bed sores, 80,000 in 1 year, completely preventable. And as a result, we're supposed to believe that somehow we are inferior as human beings, intellectually incapable, because we don't have an MD after my name. Well, sir, I don't have that MD for you to know the truth. Go ahead. I will not kiss your ass, sir, or anyone else. If you want to debate me, I'll debate you all day long on every issue. Yes! But I deal with the facts.
Okay, just take it easy.
Take it easy? No! Because we've taken it easy and we've seen millions of Americans die, million children suffer from autism, hundreds of thousands be injured, and we're supposed to sit passively back because no one likes someone who gets angry or emotional for the right cause. We have become a nation of sheep. And if you doubt me, we passed the Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act. We don't have democracy, we have bureaucracy.
Yes.
And I would rather see any doctor who wants to come into my office and sit with the people like the woman I counseled today, who wants to change their lifestyle. You have not seen the tens of thousands of people who walked out of my office who are healthier and living long lives. But not once have I ever told someone not to get a vaccine.
Let me ask you a question, sir.
Yes.
What is life expectancy today in the United States?
76.8 years.
What was 50 years ago?
Doesn't matter.
Hold on.
Wait.
No, he wants to go there. Sir, when you open a door,
Yes.
beware. There's going to be a big-ass bear coming at you.
Yes.
All right? Maybe you're debating your own patients. It's like Muhammad Ali. All right? Here's the reality, sir. You ask a question. And Fred, hold on. I'm going to answer you. You ask a question, I'm going to answer you. In the mid-1800s in Paris, there were 65,000 cesspools. Open pits where people had to take their human excrement each day and pour it. That meant almost every block. In London, they had cesspools. They had no indoor plumbing. They had no indoor water. They had no septic system. The water was polluted because their drinking water came from the river. And when they would take dead bodies, they threw them into the river because there was no more room to bury them in London. People were grossly malnourished. When you have septic water, then you're susceptible to how many different diseases? Typhoid is one, cholera is another one. When you have lack of vitamin D, when you're not getting your nutrients, you suffer from multiple malnutrition syndrome. And also you had terrible work laws. In fact, up until the 1920s in the United States, we still had child labor, even though child labor laws had earlier been passed. It was common for kids as young as 4 years old to work 16-hour days in the mines. It was common for people to work at machines 16 hours a day. It was common for people to be living as many as 16 families in one basement tenement where there was not only no water, but when it rained, it flooded. Almost every single major tenement in the United States was infested with human vermin, or rats, and then the human excrement, which created massive, massive bacterial infections. Because there was no meat standards, you could take a diseased cow. You could take the milk from the diseased cow, which is easy then to contribute to other diseases, including tuberculosis. So people's average lifespan was lucky to be above 30 years of age. Now, those who lived in the country, those who drank mineral water out of the wells, those who had gardens, they lived a longer life. We overcame scarlet fever with no vaccine. We overcame smallpox with no vaccine. In fact, we proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jenner was a complete fraud. He bought a medical degree. He had no background in medicine. And he had only one person, that young man that became the entire basis for the so-called vaccine. And the vaccine didn't even come from the smallpox. It came from horses. And then when he said, oh, I was able to cure this boy, that boy later died. His own son died. And there were doctors at the time saying, hold on a second. I have patients who had cowpox and then developed smallpox and died. So how can you say that having the cowpox and inoculating people with the cowpox protects you from smallpox? It was completely fraudulent. And as a result, we got off on the wrong foot. In fact, it was shown that in one town alone, when they cleaned up the water, they cleaned up the septic system, they made sure that people got good fruits and vegetables and more food in, they built roads to get commerce coming in and out, the incidence of smallpox just dropped way down. The first vaccine in the United States that had massive support was the measles vaccine. Look at all the charts. That's why we did the scholarship, real scholarship. We went to the public health records. It took years to do this. This isn't smacked together overnight, because I wanted to see, when were the vaccines introduced? The vaccines were introduced when 95 to 98% of the disease was gone. Now, if you want to tell me, do I have the responsibility to look at life expectancy in the 1700s, the 1800s, when you would go in the bathroom? Where did you go? There were no toilets. There were no bathrooms. You went up to a bucket. The average family passed a bucket around the house. They filled it up with their excrement and threw it out a window. All right? All this concept of our romanticism of the great life of the 1800s, when life expectancy was short, the Romans lived long lives. The Greeks lived long lives. The Mesopotamians and the Egyptians, because they understood hygiene. They would live in their 80s, 90s to 100. The Romans used to take as many as 6 baths in a day. They had colonics, using gourds and reeds. The Essenes did as well. But the Dark Ages, they destroyed that. It took a long time even to understand that germs, what they couldn't see on your hands, were killing women. When we go from operating on a woman or delivering a baby, and you've just been working on a corpse. So you took the bacteria from the corpse and you put it into women, and 50% of all women died during birth. And we wondered why. Because we refused to acknowledge the bacterial concept. And what did we do with the man who invented that? He ended up in an insane asylum. Do you know his name? Semmelweis. I've read his papers. And he was not to be the only person who invented something that was unique in medicine that was discarded. And you know who and Pasteur believed it was in the microbe. And he had a competitor who didn't get any attention. And he said it's the medium, not just the microbe. He did not deny the microbe. He said, but the medium, the body, the immune system. And you know his name? Bichon. One got the credit and one got nothing. Now, they were both partly right. So when I look back at my mother and my aunts and uncles who were born in the 1920s, they all smoked. Today, I took off the internet. I took off ads for Ronald Reagan endorsing cigarettes. I took off where Coca-Cola and 7-Up was given to babies. And these are full-page ads, including in the Journal of the American Medical Association, recommending 56,000 doctors recommend Lucky Strikes. it soothes your throat. My mother died at 58.